Ali, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do, I guess. I know you're with the Teachin Fishing guys, but I know you're a tournament angler. You're a scientist, too.
Yeah, so, I fish Masters Walleye Circuit, National Walleye Tour, do a ton of stuff with Lance and Teachin Fishin, outstanding group. And I got to vouch for Chris also. The man is outstanding when it comes to electronics and install. And he does my rigging for me also. He really knows his stuff really good. But so along with the fishing stuff, I am a scientist. So have a master's degree from School of Natural Resources at the University of Michigan in resource ecology and management. Done some work with places like USGS, NOAA. Currently trying to finish up a PhD at Wayne State University, and I'm studying Lake Erie walleye, harmful algal bloom. So, so my fishing and my science are kind of interrelated.
Very good. Can I just say we just sit up a little bit closer to the table?
Yep.
Just in the mic.
All right. How's that?
That's awesome.
All righty. So
you're helping out this weekend with the Walleye School as well. Tell us about some of the topics you'll be covering there.
Oh, man. So it's going to be, this is all in here. These guys hopefully are going to walk out of here Saturday evening with a headache. We're going to throw everything, including the kitchen sink at them. So we're going to talk about, Lake Erie walleye, migrations. We're going to talk about how how currents are generated, how they're interrelated with wind, thermal stratification and different temperature regimes of Lake Erie, bait fish, when they spawn, what are their temperature preferences, how do they move in relation to wind and different changes in temperature, how walleye relate, back to bait fish moving and everything. So we're gonna follow Teachin Fishin's 8-step process that you can check out on Lance's website and Facebook page, and we're gonna cover all these things within that framework so that people can, work on repeatability, right? So it's the most important thing in walleye fishing. We use line counter reels, we use a precision trolling app. But what a lot of people fail to realize is there's a lot more that you need to kind of think about repeating. What kind of current was it? What was the barometric pressure? What was the water clarity? What kind of bait fish were in the area? So all these different little pieces of the puzzle, we're gonna give them all in one shot over an 8-hour period. It's gonna be a marathon.
They better bring some Wheaties and some note paper, because it sounds like you're going to be teaching quite the class. I think the people that are watching here, the people that are sitting at this table, they understand what can happen with currents and how that can affect your fishing. But you may have people in that classroom tomorrow that are pretty new to this whole thing.
Yeah.
And when you spend some time down at the docks, and you have a guy pulls in and he's got a live well full of fish, and the next guy pulls in and he's like, yeah, they weren't biting today.
Yeah.
Can you just kind of talk about how that kind of people can figure that out, I guess, and at what point in the stage of an angler do they kind of start learning those types of things?
I think it varies from angler to angler. For me, even being a scientist, it came a little bit later, and it came almost by accident, playing with mapping chips and looking at waypoints and, kind of an aha moment. And that's going back to the school is kind of what we're looking for, right? So we're hoping that guys go out there and we throw this stuff at them, and they may walk out and say, I didn't get much, but then one day they're going to be on the river, they're going to see something, and that light bulb's going to go off. So I think it happens at different stages, but I think the earlier on you get that information and you get out and you get more experience on the water, you can kind of bring that into play. So I think you should get the information earlier. It may not register right away, but as you get experience, that stuff will start to come more into play.
I think a lot of it has to do with where you grow up fishing too.
Yeah.
Right. You take somebody that maybe fish the inner Saginaw Bay or the Western Basin of Erie, current, even though it's there, isn't a big deal. You take somebody that learns to fish out here and they learn here at Dunkirk or wherever, current's a big deal right from the start. So I think not only is it where you are in your evolution of an angler, but I think it's also where you learn how to fish, right?
Yeah.
That has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. And what we're seeing with Fish Talk is there's, a lot of people that are new to kind of what we do are, that's something a charter captain would buy. But really where these things are going, they're going on to a bunch of multi-species boats. Yeah. They're going on to 18-footers.
Yep.
And those guys, a lot of the guys that are buying the product, they've been fishing their inland lake for years, and they see a buddy catch a big salmon or something. It's like, oh, I want to do that.
Yes.
And then they go put this on, or then they go out and they fail, typically is what happens first. And then they start getting into it and what they need to do and how they need to learn how to do it. So talk about that learning curve and learning how to use those currents to catch more fish.
Yeah, I think if people were more observant in their fishing, they would start to pick up on those things earlier. We've all been there. You're out fishing and a boat's crab walking. You can't quite get it to run straight. One side of your offshore boards are blowing in, the other side's blowing out. Your dipsies are being blown off. And a lot of people will turn the boat, but they don't really think about, well, what's happening here? How is it affecting the fish? We've all been there where you make a trolling pass and you catch them on one side of the boat and not the other, or you catch them on the pass, you spin around and come back, and you're marking them, but they won't go, right? So you're dealing with currents and everything. So you know, I think if they start to pay attention early to those type of things, it will make it easier later on to pick those things up.
And I've always said it's easier to take someone who learned how to stream
Fishing for sure.
take them to a lake because they understand current, they understand, than it is to take a lake guy and take them to a current situation because they can't. See, it's the same thing we talk about deer hunting, right? If I learn how to steelhead fish, or I grew up fly fishing for stream trout, you understand current seams. You understand there's between me and that where I want to put my fly, there's 5 different layers of current. You understand that, and I can apply that really easy to the lake, right? If you don't grow up with that and you're just fishing on what you think is stagnant water, sometimes you don't really understand how much that water is moving down below you.
And I think that, people need to stop thinking about not just Lake Erie, but all of the Great Lakes as lakes. They're called lakes. It's a glorified river system, right? And even tomorrow, like my first slide is a picture of a stream with riffles and runs and rocks and how current is interacting and everything, because that's how Lake Erie is. It's when you talk about these things and the things that we're going to talk about, the only difference is scale and magnitude. Everything is the same. It's just that the scale changes.
And one of the things that we end up talking to a lot of people about, they call in and they're like, so you're telling me a salmon can swim 2.4 miles an hour, but he can't swim 2.9 miles an hour? And it's like, the fish can do it.
Yeah.
It's what you got tied to your line. So that's the other epiphany and the other thing that people have to figure out when they're doing it.
Yeah, something else comes into play. We'll talk about Ekman deflection, or how current changes at depth, how the angle deflects with depth. And you have to understand that fish that relate to current, their mood will change in different currents. So if you're in 100 feet of water and you're marking fish above thermocline from 30 to 70 feet of water, you have to understand that there could be 45, 65, 70 different degrees difference in current from those high fish to that low fish. So there's going to be different current speeds at those different levels also. So your baits are going to run differently. Your baits are going to run at different depths than what you intend them to. But, they are interrelated, of course. We talked about thermocline and how that thermocline will kind of move as the wind blows, kind of slosh around beneath the surface. And your bait fish, desert shad prefer 68 degrees, or rainbow smelt prefer low 60. So, those bait fish are going to be in different temperature water, and that's going to kind of help to dictate, along with currents and everything, where those walleye are going to be. They're going to be like me. I'm going to be close to the buffet. Right. So the temperature is extremely important, not just on the surface and at depth. And, I say it all the time. I'm a big proponent of the fish hawk that X4 is always on the boat. So I have the most information at all times with temperature and current at depth that I can have.
I'm a little bit on the other side of this. We have this conversation a lot. I'm a huge believer in find the bait. And I don't care my experience. I don't care if it's 80 degrees surface temperature or 40. If that's where the food is, that's where the walleyes are going to be. I'm not a big concern about what the water temperature is, other than once I find fish and they eat and they're in 75, where can I duplicate 75 again, right? So I'm more on the bait end of it. I'm worried about finding bait fish first. I don't care about the temperature. Some of the other guys are more kind of trying to find the two together first. I'm definitely a bait first guy. Temperature to me is really irrelevant.
But the difference here, you have to remember also, like I mentioned right when I got in, I fish MWC and National Walleye Tour. I'm looking for big fish. If I'm in charter captain mode, like Lance's, I'm going out, I'm looking for bait. I'm trying to get a 2 or 3 man limit in the boat as fast as possible. So again, having that knowledge will help you kind of pick out, do I want to catch bigger fish? Do I want to target smaller fish, by having those variables also? So it's different sides of the same coin, but all good information at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you're looking for, it's a different type of fishing that you're going to be doing.
That's
if
right.
You're looking for a few big bites
That's
compared to I want to fill the live
That's right.
well.
Yep. That's right.
And that was actually exactly what I was going to ask you next. Is being a tournament angler, and it's something that you're very accomplished tournament angler. If you're a guy out there, and I'm sure we've got people watching that are incredible recreational anglers. They probably catch more fish than other people on their block, and their buddies. And they're thinking, you know what, I'd like to give this a shot. What would be your advice to them?
Jump in. I jumped in thought I was a hot shot. I'll never forget, my first tournament, Detroit River in my backyard. Oh man, I'm about to go out here and give these boys a what's for, and I ended up like 110th out of 120. But it was a fantastic learning experience, right? I got my butt kicked and it humbled me. It made me think, man, I gotta really think better about this stuff. But I would suggest to jump in, have your stuff together. But I mean, my view on that is we all put our pants on it the same way, and you can run with the big boys just like anyone else can. So I would suggest they jump in and have a good time.
I think the big thing for me when I started tournament fishing was realizing that from 0 to 120, everybody can fish.
Yep.
This is where the process really became a big deal for me.
Yes.
From first place to 120, we all know how to live bait, right? We all know how to vertical. We can all fish. It's who finds the best fish faster and who makes the best adjustments. That's when I realized how important the process was of making good decisions, reacting quickly to what happened on the water, and processing that information fast, because everybody there has the physical ability to fish. They all can fish.
Yep.
Right? It's who has the ability to react to what's happening underneath the water, who sees it faster, who reacts faster. Those are the guys that continually end up at the top. That's why you see guys, win a tournament or two. The next thing you know, they're 98.
Yeah.
Sometimes you miss it, right? That's what really kicked me right in the shins was how good everybody was as an angler.
Yep.
These guys are really, really. It's like the golfers, right? You have no idea how good guys on the PGA Tour are. You have no idea how good at anglers guys that fish national circuits are. But the guys that are continually at the top, they're the guys that think the process of fishing a whole lot better.
It's decision making and having that framework in place. You can't be willy-nilly. I mentioned the 8 steps. We all use something very similar. A quick story. Craig Sleeman, who's in the school with us also tomorrow, he's from out this way for all of you listening. We were fishing in TC last year. We're on Lake Erie in South Dakota. We never saw each other all week. Day one, we both end up on the same point, 50 miles from takeoff on the same pot of fish on day one, because we went through that same process that Lance is talking about with the 8 steps and found those fish. And it was funny to look up and see him sitting there. But that kind of gives you an idea of the thought process and how people can end up on the same spots after not having seen each other all week long. So that framework is extremely important. And the best guys make the best decisions consistently. That's what separates everyone.
Yeah, I think it's another thing. And I've never fished on the walleye tour, but I've done some ice fishing tournaments. And it's one of those things where we talk about being the best guy in the block or the best guy with your buddies.
Right.
And you fish similar to what we were talking about you fishing is you're taking your friends out and you want to catch them as many fish as they can. You want to show them that good time. And, you could go and you get started in those tournaments and go out and fill a bag. And you show up and you're way off on the wind because you've been filling a bag mode. And these guys are filling a bag with big fish mode. Yeah. And that's really what I see is the big difference between the average guy and someone who's successful.
Yeah.
What you have to realize is you may be the best guy in your block, but when you go up and you start fishing those levels, everybody's the best guy in their block. Right. So it's just to get there is a big deal, right? And just to fish it and have a little bit of success says a lot about you as an angler. But it's the process, man. And it's got nothing to do. It's got nothing to do with magic lures or super hook or invisible fishing. It's got nothing, super sensitive. It has nothing to do with it. It's making good decisions and reacting to what's happening around you.
That's right.
That makes you a successful angler, charter captain or tournament guy.
That's why you put that time in, right? You get it's getting as much data as you can. You put so that when conditions change on day 1 or day 2 or day 3, you can take that information and make the best decision to get back on fish and everything. So, yeah, for sure, it's really interesting to see. But it's a great time. I'd suggest anyone interested to jump in and and measure up and see where you are.
And you're a scientist too. That was the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. I heard you're doing something on the effects of blue-green algae on walleye fry. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of my chapters of my dissertation, studying the effects of exposure to microcystis, which is one of the main mat-forming blue-green algae in Lake Erie in the bloom. So I get eggs from beta knock from Michigan DNR. I expose them to microcystis and some other algae, hatch them out to fry, and then grow them to certain size. I take a look at egg survival, hatch success, lipid content, which is fat content, is a proxy for body condition. So it's really interesting to see. So there are some effects of exposure to microcystis at high levels, at bloom levels, environmentally relevant levels that I'm seeing. Also have some stuff going on where we're using hydroacoustics. So it's a if you've ever been on my Facebook page, I post pictures. It's an airplane-like type structure, about 6 feet. I have 4 transducers, basically 400, 200, 110, and 70 kilohertz. And we fly that just under the surface through the bloom, and we're able to measure subsurface concentrations of blue-green algae. And then we map fish communities out with that also. We'll overlay some acoustic telemetry of walleye and muskie and whitefish and things that are being tracked to see how they're relating to the bloom also. And if the presence of the bloom is affecting distribution of fish communities in Western Basin, Lake Erie. We'll also take a look at some toxicity. So we have real-time toxicity numbers from NOAA and everything. So it's really important couple of chapters. I'm going to make some great papers that we'll be submitting for publication. One of them is submitted already. It's in the process of review. So I'll be getting that published. I'll get a link out there when that's published. But no, really, really good research. I'm excited about it.
What are you finding?
So I'm finding there. So there, I didn't want to, throw that out there. So just kind of. So there was, I have found some effects on hatch success. Egg survival, there wasn't a real issue. The construction of the egg, not to get too technical, kind of protects it a little bit. But once those fry started to hatch, there were some issues with survival of those fry. And, people will come back and say that, well, walleye hatch in April and the bloom is June. But there are instances where the live detectors have picked up microcystis as early as April in Western Basin. So what happens in the Maumee River, you get these little ponds and the sun heats them up on like the road beds and something. Blue-green algae will start to grow. And then when the Maumee River floods, it gets washed out and it'll actually start to grow. So there is some exposure of walleye, eggs and fry, white bass also, and some other species to blue-green algae. So I am finding that there are some negative impacts of exposure to blue-green algae with walleye fry. Also doing some stuff with tadpoles, green frogs, and yellow perch too. So again, and there are some impacts of those as well.
So that blue-green algae, let's take a year like this year, right, where we don't have a lot of snow cover. We've got the ability for algae to kind of start to
get going
germinate
earlier.
right now. I mean, is that something we're worried about? Or
yeah, just like last year late, we had that bloom. Usually the growing season is July to September. We had kind of another spurt of growth in October and November. Could have been a microclimate, layer of warm water. I'm not sure. But yeah, when you have winters without a lot of snow cover, ice cover, and warmer temperatures, that extends the growing season. They can grow earlier in the season, and then that will extend later in the season. So yes, there's definitely some concerns with bloom. But again, a lot of that bloom severity is dictated by springtime rains. So there's a couple of different factors in there. But yeah, there could be some concerns with warm spring times for sure.
All right, we're gonna have Jim Steele come on in just a second. Let's do Brian's question here before we get to that. And Ali, you can chime in on this as well.
That's definitely for you.
How big of a tool is forward-facing sonar in finding and fishing for walleye?
Now I'm like its number one fan, right? In the beginning, I was like, man, that's cheating. That's not. But quick story again. I was on Green Bay. I'll never forget this. I was on the hump. I knew the fish were there. I knew they were there. Side image them. I'm pitching jig wraps and shiver minnows. Can't catch them. My buddy Danny Miller comes up. I'm about to leave. He comes over. He scans and he goes, "Do me a favor. Don't fire up your big motor." So I just eased off with the trolling motor. Before I was 50 yards away, he came in. He popped a 7-pounder, then a 9-pounder. And then Max Wilson and Isaac Lockage came in. They're live scoping masters. They sat on that hump for 2 days and won that tournament. From that day on, I've been a forward-facing sonar guy. It's an incredible tool. I know there's a lot of kind of controversy with it, but it's an incredible learning tool. The things that I've seen and the walleye behavior that I've seen have been unexpected. How they will avoid the boat, how they chase bait. I was fishing with Tommy Kimos, not the name drop, on the river this fall. And we had a walleye chase his jig from the Belle Isle Bridge to the UAW building. How long is that?
Oh, that's probably a quarter mile.
Yeah, the same walleye chased that jig, and Tommy finally caught it at the UAW building. So it's incredible to get a scope on what those fish are really doing under the water.
Very cool. Lance?
I'm gonna answer Nick real quick while we got him here. Yeah, let's take care of Nick.
Nick must have missed your segment earlier.
Yeah. It's definitely side imaging. Side imaging just gives you a lot wider range, a lot wider beam,
for sure.
Ability to see fish. Down scan does pick them up, but you don't get the definition that you get on side scan. I'll tell you what, as much as I love my regular sonar on river and fish are located on the bottom on structure, You can take my regular sonar, give me side scan. I'll catch them every day.
I'll take it. I'll take side scan for sure.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you for your
Appreciate
time.
coming on. It's great talking to you. Great having you on the show.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Ali
All right.
Shakoor,
Thanks, Bubba.